stream.
Nothing is more expensive than bad information. Know the source. OneRadioNetwork.com.
Alrighty. Very pleasant good morning to you. As you saw on the slide, Mathew Ehret, one of our faves. He's over, not over, but he's up somewhere in Montreal. And we're going to be talking about the deep state. In just a minute, he's in the green room, but he's not green. He's looking pretty good. We were doing all of our little social media kind of posting at the beginning of every show for a couple of minutes because I'm totally over it. I just got off of MeWe and Parler and every place. I just don't want to do it anymore. I'm just bored with it. I just don't want to do it. So we're going to do our own little message board on One Radio Network. So y'all, we say you all in Texas, so y'all can talk with yourself and also have a live stream where you can ask the guest questions rather than sending an email. So that's going to be fun. And, I was out of power. I was out of water. I was out of propane. I was out of phones. I was out of everything for 10 days. And I couldn't take a shower. So I haven't recovered. So I'm not on camera because I can't wash my... No, I'm just kidding. I don't like being on camera anymore much. I'm just shy. I don't know. But we're on a couple of times a week just so you can see that I'm not falling apart because one of my things is longevity. Anyway, so that's it. We are going to have a very interesting fellow on tomorrow, Thursday, on the 4th of March. Paul Lando, and a really interesting man. And he's going to be here at 10 o'clock tomorrow. Okay, so if you'd like to join the show, we are live here this morning, March 3rd, but it's actually the afternoon, noon Central Time, noon Texas time. We are live. If you care to join the show and talk to Mathew, you can do it on the telephone, 888-663-6386. Email Patrick at oneradionetwork.com. Mathew is a good guy. He has been on several times. We like him because he's kind of a smart guy. He's editor-in-chief of the Canadian Patriot Review, a BRI expert on tactical talk. He's a regular author of strategic culture and all kinds of other things. He's got all kinds of books, and he's got all kinds of blogs, and CanadianPatriot.org is his main place. And so we welcome him and say hi to Mathew. And what time is it there in Canada, and how's the Queen?
Our head of state. It is 1 hour ahead of you, and our head of state is, I believe, still on baby blood and life support, but really? Kicking. No, I'm joking. I don't know that.
Sometimes you have to really tell us.
It is the head of state of Canada.
Sometimes you have to tell us the whole. I'm sorry. The delay is a little bit, Mathew. Sometimes you'll have to do a whole thing on how the Queen is even in Canada today and how they got involved with what South Africa, right, and China and India. I mean, boy, the UK, man, they were all over the place, weren't they, at one point?
Yeah, they were, and the old saying goes, the question was, why does the sun never set on the British Empire? Because
right.
the devil never trusted the empire in the dark.
Yeah.
No, I think the thing that is a popular misconception is that the British Empire is something of the past that went away after World War II, and today there's an American empire, and Canadians are fed this, Americans are fed this, British even people are fed this, and it's really the furthest thing from the truth. The empire is still very alive, very active, very very powerful, and even though it's been using the United States as sort of their dumb giant, enforcer for the past 70 years since World War II ended, it is still the brains behind the show, like Winston Churchill said when he organized the Anglo-American Alliance for the post-war age. He basically said, since Britain was crippled after World War II, we have to reconquer the world using British bronze and American bronze and British brains. So that's something that a lot of people haven't learned how to think about. So that's hopefully something we're going to be touching on a few times in this show today.
Yeah. So we've had people on the show. One is Joel Skousen. I'm getting a little feedback there on my voice. You know what that's about?
I could try something here. I'll put in my my headphones.
Yeah, why don't you do that? Or, try that.
Yeah, here, try this.
How's that? Yeah. So can you hear me okay?
That's better. Yeah, I can hear you okay.
Yeah, that's great. One of the fellows we have on from time to time, he's a real contrarian, Joel Skousen. And I was running past him this whole idea, as you probably know, Mathew Ehret, that there are people out there today on March 3rd that still contend that the military is in control, right, of this country, and they're going to take over the republic. And who knows? And, Joe Biden is illegitimate and that whole thing. I mean, there's a lot of people out there talking about it. Is it fantasy? Is it Walt Disney? I don't know. I mean, I have no idea. The future is making predictions is difficult, even when it involves the future. But he said, when I brought that up to him, and he's a pretty smart guy, he said, well, it ain't going to happen. It's not going to happen because the deep state control everything in this country. And all of these people are out there like General Flynn, McInerney, and Juan, his name? 107, and all these people, and Charlie Ward, and all these people who are running with this military is going to take over. He said they might all be good people, well-intentioned people, 107, and all these people, and even General Flynn, but he believes that they're all fed propaganda, bad information from the deep state who have control over the whole picture. And it's just, So that's why I thought it'd be fun to talk to you, because you've written some things on your website that you post a lot on CanadianPatriot.org. One was New Revelations shed on the British roots of the deep state. So let's dig into that. First off, do you agree with people like Skousen and others who believe that the deep state in this country really have everything well in hand and there's nothing going to be crazy going on? Do you have any theories or opinions on that?
Could you elaborate a little bit more on what this person says? That the deep state has.
Well, he just said that all of these people that are talking about, and it's very big here. I don't know, all over BitChute and all kinds of shows going on. Like the military is in Washington. They're going to take it over, right? They're going to take it over. They're going to take over the republic and the whole thing, right? And they're going to start arresting people, the pedophiles.
Oh, I see. The QAnon narrative.
The whole Q stuff. And he claims that that's all nonsense, and other people too, not just Skousen, that it's all nonsense. The deep state have everything well in control, that you don't become a part of the military, and the four-head dudes or whatever they're called, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, unless you're part of the deep state. And that's one of the reasons why they tried to get rid of Flynn, because he wasn't one of them. Do you have any theories or research or opinions on that?
Well, yeah, I think that the reason why a lot of the narratives surrounding I think extremes are generally dangerous territory to walk in. And for those who say it's all controlled by the deep state and there's really any apparent fight back against this empire is just an illusion. It's really, they're too in control. They control Russia, they control China, they control the USA, they control everybody. And there's, for basically that's very disempowering. And I think it's designed to destroy any type of creative thought that people as citizens could have to think through causality and think through their personal role of problem solving and being a participant in a broader process of necessary change. So that's problematic for sure, and it definitely incapacitates a lot of people. And then on the other side, you have another form of incapacitation, which I've seen run rampant since 2017, which you just touched upon, which is the don't worry, it's all part of the game. It's all part of the plan, I should say. And if something doesn't go according to the plan, it's part of the plan. If something, if they call it right, it's part of the plan. Everything is part of the plan.
Right.
And I've had people who have told me, like, hey, don't worry about trying to do things. The good deep state is already embedded. They've been working for decades at infiltrating the bad deep state, and now the good deep state is really, don't worry, they've got it under control. And the thing I tend to think about as a reference is like the closest thing, if somebody asked me what I feel about QAnon, is this imagery of a child in bed and telling his mom at his bedside, like, hey, there's sociopathic cannibals outside, it seems, and they want to get in the house. Shouldn't we do something, mommy? And mommy's like, don't worry, dear. We've thought about this. It's fine. Go back to bed. There's a force field around the house. And then all of a sudden you hear a bang in the front door downstairs, and he's like, mommy, I think the cannibals are getting in the front door. Shouldn't we do something? And mommy's like, no, don't worry. We've thought about this whole time. Don't worry. There's a trap door in front of the door downstairs. It's fine. Don't worry. Go back to bed. And then it's like, mommy, I hear them walking up the staircase. Mommy, shouldn't we do something? And mom's like, no, don't worry. We thought about this. There's an electrified, field around your door. Don't worry. It's okay. The kid's like, mommy, I hear the door opening. Mommy, where are you? And I think that's sort of the thing, like there is definitely a misdirection where people who could have been organizing themselves in a more constructive way for the past 4 years are turning themselves out of their potential in favor of the narratives that are being spun by people like Steve Piecnik, who's this is for me like one of the key figures if you want to get it at where do these narratives come from. I think looking at Steve Piecnik, you know who that is?
Is that the former CIA guy?
Yeah. He's a trilateral commission. He was a former assistant secretary of state under Henry Kissinger and Robert Gates and Cyrus Vance in the 70s. He's a psychiatrist who worked with the Rand Corporation, Trilateral Commission, CFR. And then, he's a crisis management guy from the 80s. He started working with who's Tom Clancy, who was already, we know from the 80s, from the Hunt for Red October, this guy was recruited early on by the CIA as part of the the predictive programming operations in Hollywood and in fiction. So a lot of the fiction that's given to us in book and TV and film format are designed specifically to create a predictive field in the imaginations of the target audience. Oh. So, I mean, we know that Tom Clancy has been a part of that openly. The CIA even admits to working with Tom Clancy for a long time. And then so Steve Piecnik has been working with him, co-writing fiction books now for quite some time. So this is the guy who came out originally sort of spinning and weaving the tales of the QAnon thing, like giving messaging from the secret nexus of white hats to the masses as a transmitter, which is, I think, it's created a huge movement. And part of this works because there is actual resistance going on. Like we know that the reason we didn't bomb Iran in 2007, when we know that Dick Cheney was on the cusp of launching a strike on Iran for their alleged nuclear weapons program, this was blocked because Dick Cheney had to go in for heart surgery. In that very moment, he went to the hospital. He was out of sort of a power position, and he was the power behind the throne under Bush Jr. That's when you had the National Intelligence Estimate. So patriotic individuals within the CIA released publicly their NIE report, which was never supposed to be made public, in 2007 in December, which proved conclusively that Iran had abandoned all of their nuclear weapons ambitions in 2002. And that took all the wind out of the sails of the war drive that was supposed to happen. So we know that there are forces who do not want nuclear war, who have patriotic impulses within intelligence, within military. We know that. The reason why the QAnon thing works is because it touches upon truths, but then it embellishes and creates a whole fictitious narrative around that, which I think, again, pulls people into the David Icke, Charlie Park, the guy who believes, or not Charlie Park, Simon Parks, who believes that he's fathered an 8-foot alien child. Like it takes you into this world where you detach your reason from discovering reality. Like you start just believing and wanting to be fed more and more elaborate stories. Yes, sir. Which again, it's like pooping in the punch bowl. You remove any potency that people could otherwise have to be human and to be problem solvers. So that's my thought on the QAnon thing currently. And
I think people like Scouts, and we like him, and I think he's a pretty interesting guy, and he's got a lot of good stuff. But it's almost like this culture with YouTube and the videos and the talk shows, and there's a billion of them, as you know, Matthew, that it's almost like people have this tendency to need to be to the extremes because they think that they need to do this to get viewers or listeners, like, you know what I mean? It's I guess it's just human nature, right?
Partially, I think that, and on some level, that's probably what's motivating some people, and on another more insidious level, I do think that there might be, some of these good people who are, I believe that they're good. I believe, a variety of them, maybe 107 is sure. Good. I think that that's possible, but I think they are getting phone calls and they're being told things, expecting them to transmit this to their followers. And they believe the message of what they're getting on the phone. Yes, sir. From whatever it is, these anonymous figures representing John F. Kennedy Jr., who's apparently still alive, running this thing. Right. So I'm sure that most of them probably believe that. So they're not disgenuine in that sense. But I think that there might be, and likely is in my thinking, a more nefarious intention overriding this thing. Because this came out of nowhere in 2017, right? It really was something that, and it has certain precedents and protocols from the anyway, that's a whole other discussion. But no, I understand. I do think that there's some nefarious intention.
I understand. I asked Joe, just to put a little cherry on that. I don't want to pick on the guy because he's not here, but I asked Mr. Skousen how long he thought the whole masking thing was going to go on, right? And this was last week. And he said forever. They're just not going to ever do it. Well, not true. Texas yesterday said, we're done. We're not going to do it anymore. So it's easy to, take these extremes and, and so, well, let's talk about this deep state. So my understanding is it, the deep state here would it be the NSA, the CIA, the FBI? Would these be the main players of what we're called the deep state in the United States?
Yeah, these are all different aspects of the same beast, I think. A lot of the institutions, the intelligence agencies, things that are tied to the Five Eyes, like the NSA, is sort of the branch of the Five Eyes inside of the USA. But the Five Eyes represents all of the major Anglo-Saxon Commonwealth countries plus the USA. That was set up as an intelligence sharing octopus, a five-legged octopus, throughout the Cold War. So the GCHQ is the expression in Britain. There's expressions in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and to say that it's just the NSA is folly. It obviously, this is an intersection and overlap of, yes, you have the FBI as more of an internal organizing secret police, then you have the CIA as a primarily foreign, operation dealing with foreign policy. And then, you have other aspects of this, and there are so many other aspects of intelligence agencies. But I think the coordinating tool, these are largely the muscle to get things done. Mm-hmm. But the intention and grand strategy, as well as tactical strategizing as concepts are concerned, I think you have to look a little bit more at certain think tanks that were set up. In my current article that you've put on your website, on the new revelations shed light on the British roots of the deep state, I make the point that things like the Council on Foreign Relations is a very important tool. This is what Hillary Clinton called the mothership. It's just down the street, from the White House, their headquarters, and the mothership. What is the CFR? People recognize that this has been a powerful institution. It runs other liberal think tanks like the Brookings Institute. It's sort of a subsidiary of this that was set up even earlier in 1909, but it's sort of run hierarchically that way. And there's many other dozens and dozens of powerful think tanks that are all enmeshed. But the CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations, was set up in 1921 as a British operation in the USA. In my paper, I get across that there's a new data dump of internal documents that's been released to the public just last week, which is very useful because these are thousands of incredible original forms and data going through the Integrity Initiative, going through Bellingcat, the Institute for Statecraft. These are all British think tanks that are all funded by the British Foreign Office. And it goes through all of the clusters of operatives that were created by these, especially Integrity Initiative, which was set up in 2015 to counter Russian propaganda and misnarratives. But it's so much deeper than that. And tens and tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars have been put into organizing clusters in every country of journalists, of people working in the governments, different type of civil servants and beyond in Greece. And it goes through the list of who they are. Who are these contact people that we've recruited in Greece, in France, in Serbia, in the USA, in all of the countries of the world. It goes through how much they're getting paid by the British Foreign Office. It goes through how they organize things like the Skripal affair that created the biggest rifts in modern times between the West and Russia by blaming, Putin on trying to kill Sergei Skripal using Novichok, which was a complete British operation entirely. And many authors have proved this. These data dumps prove it entirely as well, that it was all scripted to create a preparation for really a war with Russia, and also ultimately with China. And this gets across that the USA, China, and Russia have ultimately the same enemies. So even though a lot of Americans have been led to believe by, Epoch Times, a lot of the mainstream media, that China is the big bad enemy behind the scenes trying to run the show and create the New World Order, and other Americans who tend to be more left tend to believe that it's Russia that's behind the scenes running the New World Order, and they're the ones putting their puppet President Trump in power. It's actually not the case on both extremes. Both sides are missing the British intelligence City of London angle to all of this. So what I tried to do in this essay is just get across that this is a springboard to understanding the deeper British takeover of U.S. internal and foreign policy, which goes back many generations into the past. So the Council on Foreign Relations set the stage, and people think, but isn't that an American organization? Well, you'd think so. But really, this was set up by the Royal Institute for International Affairs in 1921. And that today is known as Chatham House. That's the most powerful think tank in the British Commonwealth and the world. So Chatham House, this is the organization that Henry Kissinger spoke at in 1981, when he said that during his time as Secretary of State under Nixon, he spent more time briefing the British Foreign Office than he did his own State Department. And he also describes in this famous speech how when looking at the battles over what the post-war era was going to look like between Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Winston Churchill, Kissinger says, I much preferred Winston Churchill's wisdom over the folly of Franklin Roosevelt, because Franklin Roosevelt, for those who actually know their history, would see that, would get a lot of insight out of what Kissinger just said. Because what did Franklin Roosevelt want for the post-war world? He wanted a world of cooperating sovereign nation states capable of developing full-spectrum economies built around a China-US-Russia alliance. I mean, that's why Churchill and that's why Churchill hated FDR so badly, because Churchill wanted a one-world government with a U.S.-British Anglo-American special relationship to enforce their colony program onto the world. And Roosevelt was in opposition. He said, no, what we did in the New Deal by building the Tennessee Valley Authority and the rural electrification projects and all of this is something we should be providing through long-term loans to other countries in Africa and South America and India and beyond to develop themselves, to stand on their own 2 feet. And that he made total enemies. So what I make a point in this paper is that FDR's vice president, Henry Wallace, shared Franklin Roosevelt's vision. And this is what Kissinger hates as well. Like, this is what Kissinger devoted his life to destroy in the United States during all of his time, his decades of influence as a U.S. foreign policy maker and member of the Council on Foreign Relations. So Wallace had said and warned in 1944 that fascism in the post-war era inevitably will push steadily for Anglo-Saxon imperialism and eventually for war with Russia. Already, American fascists are talking and writing about this conflict and using it as an excuse for their internal hatreds and intolerances towards certain races, creeds, and classes.
Well,
and this is 1944.
Wow, look, what does that sound like today, right? Whoa.
Yeah. No, exactly. This is before the Cold War started. I mean, and Wallace was a major... If he had succeeded in his presidential bid in 1948, and also if he had not been kicked out of the vice presidency in favor of Harry Truman, who was a Wall Street lackey, who loved Churchill. Had that not happened, there would not have been a Cold War. It's a fact. It would not have happened. The world would have unfolded very differently, with a world of mutually sovereign nation states cooperating on big projects that elevate the standards of living of everybody along the way. Kind of like what China is doing today with the Belt and Road Initiative, where 135 nations representing all of the different cultures and religions of the world are working already on a framework to build and work on these giant infrastructure projects for high-speed rail and water projects, greening deserts. It's all happening right now on that part of the world, which is ironic because that's acting more American in so many ways than the America that we are seeing today under Biden. And I think that
excuse me. So all of these things that we're seeing, like the Black Lives Matter and all of the separating people, men and women, black and white people, and all of the deplorables and the domestic terrorists who don't agree with the globalists. This has all been in the works for a long time, and it's all being perpetrated by these same big, all the way back to Britain. This is their plan. This is what they want as part of this whole one world government thing.
Yeah, like the origins, the roots, if you want to get at the heart of the Five Eyes, you have to look at the collapsing British Empire at the end of the 19th century, and then Cecil Rhodes. So what was happening around the 1860s to the 1902 period when Cecil Rhodes dies and creates his Rhodes Trust. His entire will bequeaths all of his fortunes that he accumulated as a diamond and resource magnate in South Africa, what's today called, or what was then called Rhodesia. He was the head of Rhodesia. It was based on his name. So he basically raped Africa for a long time, extracted a lot of money, created a large fortune actually, with the help of the Rothschilds in London. He interfaced very closely with Lord Palmerston in the British Foreign Office. And he bequeaths his money to a policy of reconquering the world and creating a new British Empire with the focus on taking back control of its lost colony, the United States. And he literally says in his 1877 will that defines sort of the manifesto, it's sort of the constitution of how the Rhodes Trust is going to work. I pulled out a little quote in my article, which I'll just read here quickly. It's short. But he said, "Why should we not form a secret society with but one object, the furtherance of the British Empire and the bringing of the whole of uncivilized world under British rule for the recovery of the United States and for the making of the Anglo-Saxon race but one empire?" That's the heart of the Five Eyes. So he's writing this in 1877. His will is activated with the creation of the Rhodes Trust in 1902. With the Rhodes Trust comes two organizations that involve a new type of technique to do what he desires, which is creating a Rhodes Scholarship program.
Yes.
And up until now, there's been thousands upon thousands of young talent from around the world who have been recruited to and given Rhodes Scholarships.
Like
what
Clinton,
this means, I mean,
Clinton
is one.
Yeah, sure.
Exactly. There's many in the Biden administration currently. Kerry is not a Rhodes Scholar, no.
Oh, he's not.
But,
I thought he was.
Yeah, skull and bones. But again, very, very enmeshed. There's many in the Biden cabinet right now. Susan Rice is one of them. The current science czar, Ehret, I'm forgetting his name. The guy who headed the Human Genome Project was one of them. Was one of them. Anyway, so
Rhodes Scholars, right?
The Rhodes Scholars. So what this is you search and look for people around the world who have talent, who are young people with passion, and you indoctrinate them. You give them a special indoctrination, all expenses paid, and then you deploy them back to their home countries to infiltrate and grow in influence in anything that they can permeate. This think tank, there was a think tank set up called the Round Table Movement, headed by Rhodes's prodigy, Lord Alfred Milner, who basically made his fortune and reputation destroying the Transvaal Republic uprisings in the Boer Wars, where you had Dutch Republican settlers working with the Zulus, who had been both suppressed by British intelligence and British imperial operations, and they both rebelled to create a republic. It was called the Transvaal uprisings, and they were suppressed. Concentration camps were created by Lord Milner and the Rhodes Network. Milner had a kindergarten of young sociopathic agents that were working with him through the British office in South Africa. where they innovated the concentration camp program that was later deployed and used by Hitler much, much later on, but it was innovated then. And basically, these guys all became the heads of the Round Table movement. Leo Amory, Lord Lothian, others who became leading figures that Henry Wallace and Franklin Roosevelt fought against deeply throughout the entire 30s and 40s, who worked with the City of London and Wall Street to create a fascist machine to destroy nation states, essentially, and create a one world government ruled not by Hitler, but Hitler was supposed to be, with Mussolini and Franco, sort of enforcers of an imperial will, kind of like what Dick Cheney was supposed to be, or what they want the U.S. to be under their doctrine. Is the U.S. is supposed to be the physical enforcer of the will of a higher technocratic elite. That was the same logic that was used back then. FDR, Wallace were in opposition. But all that to say, so you had the Round Table movement and the Rhodes Scholarship Program. They're both coordinating. They were both funded by the Rhodes Trust. The reason why was because, and I'll say a bit about what came a little bit before that and a little bit after that, because this is what created the Council on Foreign Relations. That came in 1921 as the creation by the Round Table movement. But what were they trying to stop? The British Empire in the 1880s, 1890s was quite weak, and the entire world was adopting Abraham Lincoln's American system of protective tariffs, of national public credit, investments into rail that would develop the inland continental power of a nation, so that nations were no longer reliant upon maritime trade, which is how the British Empire was able to always run the world for hundreds of years, was by controlling 13 choke points on maritime trade and ports strategically around the world. They were able, just by controlling these choke points, to control the flow of trade, the goods, and everything else on the world map. So by nations actually developing their inland resources and creating full spectrum industrial economies, they were able to stand on their own 2 feet and not be reliant upon the British controllers. They were also, by creating national banking, which is what Lincoln did with the greenbacks, as part of the American constitutional banking tradition. Places like Russia, like Meiji's Japan, like France, like Germany's Otto von Bismarck were able to create the Zollverein and to fund these large-scale projects for replicating the success of the best of the USA in their own countries. And this was understood as the new paradigm for mankind going into our next phase of evolution. It was understood by all participants that this was the idea of a unipolar world order controlled by a Hobbesian elite from the top was obsolete, and the British Empire, its evil had been shown to the world. Nobody wanted that anymore.
Wow.
So
it almost sounds a bit, Mathew, like what President Trump, a bit, right? Yeah, with his policies, infrastructure,
it's all
and all
based
of
on
that, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's all based. The American system is based on every nation first. Globalization is fine as long as you define globalization not by worshiping money, but rather by every nation on the globe working as neighbors on their own interests. So you have to really care about your own well-being. If everybody cares about their own well-being, they're going to treat their neighbors well as well. They won't be afraid of their neighbors who are jealous of them because they've stolen and wrecked their neighbors' economies, as we have to so many of the world today. There's no insecurity in that sense, because everybody has a sense of trust in their neighbors who see that, okay, it's in my interest to help my neighbor get better, not to suppress my neighbor and undercut them.
And wasn't that Donald Trump's message at Davos last year?
That was exactly.
He was telling them all, why don't you guys take care of yourself? You should take care of yourself. He said that. So this is
every nation first.
So these are the forces that have been trying to get rid of this man for 4 years and still trying to keep him from running again today. Right.
Exactly. And thank God Donald Trump is still showcasing a real fighting spirit. I really am enlivened by that. Even as a Canadian, I find that very important. But this is important too, because in 1902, the same year that Rhodes dies and creates his will and this whole new organizing strategy to reconquer the U.S., this is the same year that William McKinley had just passed away. He had just been assassinated in 1901, the year before that, and Teddy Roosevelt is just coming in now in 1902 as the new president, who's just like how Franklin Roosevelt dies as a patriot, and then now over his dead body you have Harry Truman, his vice president, who's installed and takes power as an Anglophile tool. Same thing for Teddy Roosevelt, Anglophile tool, imperialist, eugenicist, But Teddy Roosevelt, William McKinley,
Yeah.
William McKinley was a Civil War veteran, a lover of the principle of the American system of national sovereignty and the idea of every nation working together. And he was the last president to really talk about openly the American system until Donald Trump did it in 2017 and started re-invoking the McKinley tariff, the idea of infrastructure. So it's very similar to what they were trying to quash back then. And after McKinley dies, it's really 30 years of hell where, you have these networks orchestrating the Bolshevik Revolution, interfacing with their JP Morgan, because the Rockefeller Foundation, the Rockefeller family, JP Morgan itself was a British bank in the 1850s. People forget that. It was a British bank, something Peabody, that was then infused into America in 1852 as a way for the city of London to start buying up and trying to control American railroads and industry and corrupt it from within. And that's where the Morgan family got in, and the name was changed. The Rockefellers, they started originally perhaps as a pro-industrial group, but they quickly became absorbed into this City of London, operation very, very quickly.
And didn't McKinley also really mess with the money too? He wanted to really do something with the bankers, and wasn't that one of the reasons why he was assassinated? So the story goes.
Yeah. Like he had a whole program to develop mass infrastructure, including for South America and Central America. He had a program to do a lot of that, and it was going to be through state funding of a sort of greenback style program for productive credit. So he was trying to revive that, which is it was vital. And I mean, before him, you had Garfield, who was just assassinated in 1880. Lincoln had been assassinated. And then until Franklin Roosevelt, you only have one guy who tries to bring it back in 1921, which is Warren Harding. And Harding is sort of the last of that anti-imperial Republican breed who comes out. He says no to the League of Nations, because the League of Nations was, again, a Milner creation. That's why the Round Table movement took control of Britain by ousting Herbert Asquith in 1916 so that they could control the terms of the post-war arrangements for the Versailles Treaty, which was designed to crush and destroy the American system policies still alive in Germany, because Germany was not Hitler at that time. It was a different type of beast back then. They were still under the Otto von Bismarck, Frederick List policy in Germany, and that's what Britain was afraid of and had to be crushed. So when the Round Table movement created the Versailles Treaty, they also created the League of Nations as sort of a program to create a one world government. It was like a great reset. They applied their policy to create hyperinflation in Germany, to destroy them by forcing them to just money print to pay unpayable war debts. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it was the League of Nations world government strategy was resisted by patriots in the US who had taken back control after 20 years of traitors like, we saw. And that was under Warren Harding. And Warren Harding did a lot as well in that direction, but his presidency was cut short because he was only there for 2 years until what happens? He's on a train, he eats some bad oysters and dies. Very suspicious. No autopsy, right?
So after Harding, these people have had control of the presidency in the United States pretty much until Trump?
No, because that was, you had then the Morgan machine took total control under Coolidge and Hoover. Coolidge was the worst, but the guy who was really the driving controller of all this whole thing was Andrew Mellon, the Treasury Secretary, who ran the Federal Reserve policy, the City of London policy.
Bank, right? New York?
Yeah, exactly.
Bank. Oh, baby.
And
big bank.
And that's what regulated the economy. It created mass speculation throughout the 1920s, the Roaring Twenties, and that's resulted in the bubble that was then popped at a certain strategic moment in 1929 to create the conditions of trauma in the population, who would then be able to accept, they thought, the unacceptable, which was fascism as the economic solution, which was always what they wanted. That's sort of like what they're doing today. They want to create, with the current bubble collapse that they're setting up, they want to create a shock therapy into the population for a certain period so that people will become extra mushy and desperate to feed their families and accept any type of thing which the Great Reset crowd wants to bring online today.
Let's talk about that, because that's really curious, because this whole term fascism keeps coming up, which is even, it feels like what's going on in this country is more fascism than socialism or liberalism, or, right? I mean, it's, so let's talk about that, but we need to do a little commercial first, okay? And also, on this shot, I'm losing you a little bit on your right side. I just don't want to lose half your head there. You stay right there. Mathew Ehret. What a cool guy. Well, now, this is interesting stuff. I mean, this is one of the reasons why you want to come to One Radio Network and listen to people like Mathew. I mean, you think you're going to get this kind of information or this kind of stuff from CNN or Fox or anybody else? I mean, I don't know how he even gets all this stuff. Crazy. It's great. I love to look at the deep into what's going on. Mathew Ehret, he's here from time to time. Patrick Timpone. And if you'd like to get a great little tool, we'll listen to this. Previously with cardiologist Dr. Joel Kahn, 35 years experience in cardiology.
On your commercial break, you hit a hot button because I'm a giant fan of infrared sauna and the cardiac benefits.
Tell us about why you like these saunas for the heart. What does it do?
In Japan, it's a traditional therapy of heart disease to even sick heart patients to sit for 15 or 20 minutes in an infrared sauna, then lie down and rest and hydrate for about half an hour. They call it WAON, W-A-O-N. It means soothing heat. And they've done research studies, like 30 of them in humans. Anti-ages your arteries and improves the strength of your heart, and it may actually prolong survival in sick heart patients. Anybody can just, again, go to the internet, read about infrared sauna heart disease, or put my name there because I've written many articles about it. Now there's data coming out of Sweden and Finland because they've published some amazing data, the number of times a week you're in a sauna, number of minutes each time. You can just track out how long you're going to live. So very powerful therapy by being in, my favorite is an infrared sauna.
Well, I don't know about you, but if the heart muscles and the arteries are happy, things are good. Indeed. And this is just a great tool. I'm in mine, and not that it matters what I do, because, it just doesn't matter what I do, but I'm in mine virtually every day of my life. And these are very low EMFs. And you can see a picture there if you're watching on video, or if you're not, you can go on One Radio Network and click on it and watch it. And you can see the way it looks. It's got this silver material, which is kind of antibacterial stuff. And you have a very nice chair, very sturdy chair, not some kind of weird rickety chair. And you just put a towel over that and you sit in there with your head out. And we know after years of looking at this idea that it's not good to heat up your head like with the sauna. That, get your whole head out. You don't want to do that. It's good to have a hot booty and a cool head. I don't know where I heard that. But these saunas are great. If you'd like to get one, the only way to get the best price is to email me, Patrick, your congenial host, Patrick at oneradionetwork.com. Patrick at oneradionetwork.com. The price is $1,195 delivered in the lower 48. We ship them all over the world. Where Mathew lives in Montreal, I think it would cost Mathew about, another $150. But he's on the team here, so we'll probably give him even a discount if he wants one. Anyway, these are great tools. The Relax Far Infrared Sauna. Email me, and I'll hook you up. We sell quite a few of them. People love them, and I think you'll enjoy them. OneRadioNetwork.com. Have you ever tried the elk velvet antler?
Starving for vitality, we're turning to energy drinks, stimulants, and pharmaceuticals to try to improve our focus, increase our metabolism, rescue our sex drive, and adapt to the stresses of modern day living. Each year, an elk sheds its impressive antlers, regenerating an even larger set the following year. These velvet antlers have been a revered traditional medicine for thousands of years. Elk antler harnesses the adaptogenic and highly regenerative growth factors from this natural and ethical resource into a concentrated, bioavailable extraction. Its revitalizing effects span bone, muscle, and nerve support, improve metabolism, cellular repair, sexual potency, anti-inflammation, vascular strengthening, and hormone production. Humanely harvested from free-range U.S. elk, extracted in organic alcohol, and protected in Miron glass, our elk antler is available in 3 strengths to restore your vitality at any level.
Now, if you go on Survival today, which we are live here on March 3rd, 2021 in the afternoon, you can then also get yourself 20% off on all colostrum products on Survival. Use promo code HEALTHY2021. One more day, 20% off on all colostrum products. It's a great product, so you might want to try it. I don't know if you've ever experienced Andreas seed oils. We've known Andreas for a long time. He's a fascinating fellow, gymnast. He was a gold medal kind of guy, and they used to fill him full of steroids and all kinds of drugs so he would win. And they do that, you know. And he actually healed himself with fresh pressed flaxseed oil that a neighbor of his, he was in the hospital and he was going to die. And he said, I got to get out of here. He went home and pretty much on his deathbed, and his neighbor started to give him fresh pressed flax oil that he just did himself. And he made a recovery, and he was really in bad shape from all of these drugs that they gave him so he could jump higher and all that. And so this put him on this whole plan to produce the finest seed oils ever. And they're remarkable. They're black cumin seed oil, a coriander seed oil, a pumpkin seed oil, black sesame seed oil, hemp seed oil, and sunflower seed oil. And these are seed oils that are pressed with virtually no friction, no heat. So the oxidation in these oils are just non-existent. And most oils out there, God love them, even at the hippie food store in the refrigerator, they're not very good for you. Most of them are rancid. And so you don't want to mess with them, especially, at the Kroger or the Safeway with clear glass bottles of, these oils. You don't want to do that at all. But even the hippie food stores, these oils are not that good. God, they try cold pressed and all that, but these are premier oils, the best. They're all in Myron glass, and these are really, in my opinion, the only kind of oils you want to put in your body. They're very healing. Black cumin seed, you can Google some of these oils, and they've been known to use for, hundreds of years for healing properties. For example, with ulcers, black cumin seed oil, practically the best thing you could ever do if you had an ulcer from, politics or something. So anyway, check them out. It's a great company. It's Andreas Seed Oils on OneRadioNetwork.com.
Know the source. One Radio Network. Know the source. The source. OneRadioNetwork.com.
It's one of the things we pride ourselves in of kind of knowing all of the products. We know the people, so we appreciate if you need some things that take care of your health, that you'll come to our website and see if you find some things that are interesting to you. Mathew Ehret is with it, CanadianPatriot.org. It's a .org, the Patriot. That's a .org, right? Yeah. What happened to your audio? Wait a minute. I lost your audio. I lost your audio.
Yeah, it's the power of the mute button.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So it's a
.org. My cat was making noise, and I was just trying to spare.
I really appreciate you. I really appreciate you coming on from time to time. I mean, you're a fancy dresser there with your vest, and I'm sure you look at all those books. I know you got a lot of things to do. So I appreciate you coming on. It's an honor to have you. It's so fun. I don't know how you remember all this stuff. You read these books and you do this research. How do you remember all these parts? I don't know. How's that even possible?
I don't know.
Okay, so let's talk about what's going on now. So let's just lay the groundwork. So you've given us a little background. So what we're experiencing now with whoever are controlling the Biden administration, getting back in the WHO, getting back in the Paris Treaty, getting the Agenda 21 thing up and running, the Green New Deal, right? NATO, the UN, Fauci's out there saying, you got to wear a mask for another year. So who are these people? And in the term of fascism, anybody that is contradicting what they are saying, as you know, they're getting censored. We're off of YouTube, Vimeo, everywhere. censored us, One Radio Network. Anybody that's saying anything that's reasonable, they just censor you. So this is pure fascism, right? I mean, who are these people and what is their goal? Why do they care about Robert F. Kennedy questioning vaccines and and censoring him from a Telegram and from Instagram? I mean, why do they care? What's their goal?
Well, before the commercial segment, just out of curiosity, how much time do we still have left?
Whatever
left for
you
this
want,
program?
brother. I'm with you, man. Just go for it.
You're open. Oh, okay, all right.
I got nowhere to go.
Flexible. That's
I
great.
got nowhere to go.
Too. Yeah, it's okay. Good. Well, before the commercial break, you'd mentioned what is fascism, and I pulled up a quote that I really liked a lot, and I think that'll give us a way to sort of zero in on that question of who it is, because I personally think that it matters less who is doing this versus why and how this is happening. Obviously, the who's matter, but it's like, who killed Kennedy? What were their names of all of the individual, 3, 5, 6 shooters? It matters less what their names are, and what they did for the next 40 years with their money. It matters how and why was Kennedy killed? What was Kennedy doing? Which power structures was he removing power from by his policy actions? Right.
Yes, sir.
That gets you a little bit more into an empowering place to understand what's controlling your current situation, and also what are the insecurities of the empire? What are the things that it is afraid of?
They're Achilles heel. The type. They're Achilles heel. What are they afraid of?
Exactly. Yeah. That's what we want to expand our insight into, because there are pathways. Natural, lawful pathways that can be taken, which can reduce their power structure, which they're afraid of. So we want to, whatever the enemy is afraid of, we want to do more of that.
Yes.
And it's not always the self-evident thing that one might believe naively to be the case. But all that to say, what Franklin Roosevelt, he defined fascism in, I think, a very useful way in 1938, when he said, "Unhappy events abroad have retaught us two simple truths about the liberty of a democratic people. The first truth is that the liberty of a democracy is not safe if the people tolerate the growth of private power to the point where it becomes stronger than their democratic state itself. That, in essence, is fascism. Ownership of government by an individual, by a group, or by any other controlling private power." And I think that gets us into the essence of fascism. It's maybe not the full definition, but that if you want to look at what exactly happened for the next, after FDR died in April 12th, 1945. Wallace was completely ousted from government by 1946. He was, downgraded to Commerce Secretary, and he was ousted because he was considered a Russian agent, and he was in opposition to the Cold War, which every patriot must be in support of the Cold War. And so all of the instruments that FDR and Wallace and others like Harry Dexter White had created from Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, 1944, like the IMF, the World Bank, the United Nations, these were all corrupted and infiltrated and taken over by their enemies. And there's another quote in my article by FDR right before he dies. He has a conversation with his son, who writes a book, where FDR says that there are people within his own State Department who he I've lost my quote. Anyway, but he describes to his son how his own State Department is operating under the control of the British Foreign Office, and how he is the only person that he himself can trust. Now he dies. Again, just like Warren Harding, we'll never really know why or how he died. Or we won't know how he died because there was never an autopsy on his body either. But Stalin believed in an interview with FDR's son in 1946, Stalin said that he believed that it was Churchill's people who poisoned his father, Franklin. So we know that in the ensuing decades, the U.S. was increasingly taken over. Patriots were increasingly purged from power structures of influence. John F. Kennedy represented a restoration of a patriotic impulse in 1961 until his death in 1963. He had the help of certain people who guided him, like Charles de Gaulle, like Eisenhower at different times. Eisenhower was a fool for much of his presidency, but he wasn't a traitor himself. He was just a fool. He trusted the wrong people. And he woke up to it in his famous, military industrial complex speech on his outgoing speech. And he spent a lot of time working also with Douglas MacArthur to educate Kennedy. So him and his brother Robert became much more aware than his enemies realized he was going to be able to navigate through the minefield. And he put a lot of things into motion. He tried to create a silverback currency to bypass the Federal Reserve using treasury bills. A lot of these were even created and circulated, and they were designed to fund the growth of continental water projects. Kennedy had greenlighted so many water projects for the West Coast that were moving towards a total paradigm of continental water management that would have involved water from Alaska moving down into California and Texas, which would have, there wouldn't be a water problem or of any sort in the West Coast or Southwest coast of the USA today had his policies not been sabotaged with his death. He also did the space program as a way to kindle a certain optimistic future orientation in the population, which was very important, and offered Russia the chance to work together with the USA to jointly put a man on the moon instead of it being a unilateral thing. So these were all ideas that would have canceled the Cold War. It would have taken all of the tension out of those who wanted to maintain a system of a strategy of global, left versus right, capitalist versus communist tension and nuclear terror, which psychologically traumatized the whole generation of young people who became, today's baby boomer generation, who have really carried the scars of that experience with them throughout the years. It's part of a psychological global effect, and it was designed to be that way, to make a certain generation become very conducive to manipulation that was laid out by people like Aldous Huxley or his brother Julian Huxley, who said very clearly in 1946, when Julian Huxley, who was the president at the time of the the British Eugenics Association, Julian Huxley creates, he becomes the first founder of UNESCO, the United Nations Education, Science, and Cultural Organization, and he lays out in the manifesto, the UNESCO, its purpose and philosophy that people could still read online. He lays out very clearly that the purpose of the re-education, of the revamping of world educational norms that the UNESCO would be responsible for, must be to create a new ethic where he says eugenics, and he says it, it's not me saying this, he says it in the thing, that eugenics is the most important branch of social science ever created by mankind, to take sort of the control of evolution Darwinianly from the hands of nature into the hands of human social engineers. And he's clear on that. And he says Hitler has made these things unthinkable currently because people saw the logical consequence to applying these ivory tower theories in a fascist state. So people had become horrified by the killing of useless eaters and sterilization of the unfit and all of this stuff. But he says it's still very important as a science, even though we don't like how Hitler might have done it. So we have to make the unthinkable once again become thinkable. And that's all in the UNESCO founding document. He's the guy who goes on to create the term transhumanism. That's Julian Huxley. Wow. He goes on to create the environmentalist movement. He co-founds the World Wildlife Fund for Nature with Prince Philip and Prince Bernhard in 1961. He works closely with the British Privy Council in the creation of the Conservation Trust, which he also co-founds in 1947, as a way to take the fascist population control policies of the 1930s that Hitler had put into force, and then rewire them and give them a new sort of image around protecting nature from human technological infrastructure creation. Because human beings, they basically said we have to, instead of thinking that human beings' problems come from empires trying to rape and impose injustice on the world, it's not that's the problem. It's human beings themselves that they had to convince us was the problem. It's our very act of trying to make life better for our children by using infrastructure and science and technology and progress and nuclear power and all of these things for the good of our kids and future. That's what we had to convince ourselves, or be convinced that was the enemy. And every time we try to make an infrastructure project, like moving water from one place that has a lot of water to a place that has a little bit of water through dams and water diversion projects that JFK was doing, that obviously transforms the balances of the desert that's now becoming green with fresh water. So that's unnatural. That's bad. When you have industrial activity that involves removing poverty from a nation, you create energy that uses, natural gas or fossil. I don't even like calling it fossil fuels, but you burn things as far as giving people electricity and industry that creates the effect of carbon dioxide as an emission. They found a way to try to say, okay, let's use a statistical analysis to connect carbon dioxide with the Earth climate changing. And at the time, in the late 60s and 70s, they were trying to link it to the global cooling, because the world had been cooling from 1945 until 77. Right. And they were saying, you could pick up the old National Geographics with research studies funded by the World Wildlife Fund Connected Networks back then, that were saying, it's carbon dioxide emissions that are causing global cooling. That's what they were saying. And Leonard Nimoy has little documentary on YouTube where he's hosting, he's paid to host the global cooling crisis caused by pollution. And then all of a sudden, when the cooling stopped and there was a warming trend from 1977 until like 2001, that was a general trend of warming. Then they said, okay, well, let's just rewire the argument so that still the enemy is industrial output, but now we'll just say it's causing another thing. And today it's another thing, now they're just saying it's climate changing. It's because the warming had sort of plateaued in 2001. Now it's been sort of like not really warming anymore, and it's just random changes, and it used to be called the weather. But they're still trying to blame it all on carbon dioxide, which is why the Paris Climate Accords are all about reducing carbon output down to like pre-industrial levels. What they're actually saying is we need to reduce population. We have to contract society's ability to sustain 8 billion or more people. And if you go for green energy grids, Green New Deals, solar panels and windmills, that type of energy source is of such a low grade, low quality type of energy that you cannot power the industrial activities necessary to support 8 billion or more people. You could maybe support 1 billion or so people at a lower quality of life, except for a selected few at the top who are supposed to be the beneficiaries of the pyramid. But really, it's a depopulation agenda.
Wow.
So
let me ask then. So that's the Green New Deal perpetrated by now the Biden administration and Bernie Sanders and AOC and all these socialists. They don't really understand. They probably just really believe that solar panels but you say that it's a big globalist idea to eugenics to lower the population because there just won't be enough juice to go around, as was proven in Texas 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Texas is a perfectly good case study of this. That's correct. And people like AOC or Bernie Sanders, like they're human beings for the most part. They're not like Dr. Evils, but if they just came out, and if you just came out saying like we need to lower the world population and that's why we have to cancel all of these big infrastructure projects that JFK was doing, and that's why we had to shut down investments into nuclear fusion power, which all got shut down in the late 60s, and that's why we had to cancel the space program when we shut down Apollo in 1973. And today the U.S. can't even put a human being back on the moon if they wanted to, because all of this was consciously. No, they can't. They don't have the technology. We don't have the juice. That's why it was such a. No, that's why it was such a big success when Donald Trump revived the manned space program, because it was totally shut down. And so they had to rebuild and reconstruct those capacities that we once had decades ago. We self-sabotaged, and it took a lot of time to start reconstructing that, to the point that we didn't have to go and ask Russia, please let us use your Soyuz spacecraft to put a human being into orbit anymore, because that's what we were doing for many years until Donald Trump finally revived the U.S. ability to launch human beings into orbit. But we still can't even land a human being on the moon anymore. I mean, we shut down the rocketry. They canceled all of that.
Interesting. So let me interrupt. So what's going on now today with fascism that we can all relate to, our listeners around the world today? That is, I guess, building this whole energy towards more of these people that we've been talking about, not the who's, but the what's. So what do they want, and what do they want?
They want what Cecil Rhodes was talking about. They want to get rid of all sovereign nation states, the institution itself of sovereign nation states, which really only arose out of the European a golden renaissance of the 15th century. That was before that. There really wasn't nation states. There were some city states, but it was pretty much a world of empire. There was nothing other than empire and different types of empire ever, And so in the Renaissance, you had a new idea that natural law was the guide for economic and political law. So the concept that, there's a divinity of the individual because we're made in the image of the creator. And because we're made in the image of the creator, because we could discover and ever improve upon our understanding of nature's creation, which involves our own minds too, where we are created by nature, but we're the only part of creation that can self-reflect and then willfully, through reason and conscience, change our modality of behavior in accordance with our discoveries for the good of both ourselves, our children, and the world around us, right? We can empathize with others and sacrifice for a greater good. So we have a concept of the soul, of the conscience.
Yes,
so all of these concepts together animated a movement politically that was then acted upon for the first time by King Louis XI in France. Mm-hmm. And it was defined around the idea that as a king, and you could read Louis XI's like Rosebush of War and his messages to his kids. There was a movement of Platonic humanists who arose around him, who basically had the understanding that if you are a king, you are not that doesn't mean that you are the privileged minority to impose your will on your slaves. It means that you're a servant and an instrument of God's will, and you have a duty to the people who you serve to do good for them. And so the treasuries became redirected towards infrastructure building, the investment into increasingly engineering projects, the arts and culture, teaching orphans how to read, so mass education projects, which never happened in the Dark Ages.
Which Louis was this? What year?
Louis XI in 1460 something.
Was he rare in his benevolent dictator?
Oh
king? Yeah, he was a rare dude.
Yeah, he was quite rare. But there were co-thinkers who felt the same sort of thing as he did as a Christian king, and King Henry VII was a follower of his example and acted in England to replicate his principle of political economy. People like Thomas More, Erasmus were organizers of Henry VII. Unfortunately, his son Henry VIII was more of a degenerate who was corrupted.
Henry.
But Henry VII was a good guy, and that was known as what's called cameralism. The political economy had a name. It was called cameralism, and it was not empire. It was nothing else, and so this is what evolved out of the Renaissance, and it took on more form coming out of the 30 Years' War, where you had finally the Peace of Westphalia that was created by Cardinal Mazarin and Finance Minister Colbert in France, who organized all of the different warring factions of Protestants versus Catholics who had slaughtered themselves for decades, funded by Venetian and Dutch bankers who were just funding all sides to create a war of all against all forever. And half of Germany died. Throughout the 30 Years' War, half of Germany was wiped out. The Black Forest was razed to the ground. It was like, you can't even imagine how bad it was. And finally, the peace treaty that put an end to that conflict. And all sides, like I said, were being funded by the same bankers, the same oligarchs who were the same families that are still in power today at the top of the pyramid. There's the same families that could trace their lineages back to like the days of the Roman Empire and Babylon. So Colbert and Mazarin organized. This time it was under Louis XIV, who was a bit of a lopsided king. Sometimes did good, sometimes did bad. He soon became, anyway, he did his worst as a king under the influence of the Jesuits, which was a sort of Masonic counter operation to try to create a new type of religious mercenary force that was beholden to the empire in 1534 under Ignatius Loyola. That's a whole other sideshow. But these groups really influenced the king. But the point is that the Peace of Westphalia created the foundation for the modern sovereign nation state as we know it. So when Henry Kissinger comes out and he's given many speeches saying we have to create with the 9/11 attack in the USA, we have to now create the post-Westphalian era. When he says that, what he's referring to is the Westphalian principle that time of 1648, which said, okay, we will now recognize that every nation has sovereign boundaries that have to be respected. But the key was the benefit of the other, that as of in that treaty, the first three principles of the preamble of that treaty involved every nation working for the benefit of their neighbor, on the basis also of the forgiveness of past transgressions. And these things were the key that made the thing work. And it was tied to infrastructure projects in France and Germany, that both sides would start funding canals, education projects, industry that would alleviate the burdens of life of the peasants and also create educational opportunities. So this was an explosive revolution in statecraft that then took on new form with the American Revolution. People like Alexander Hamilton, who studied Colbert, he studied, Ben Franklin also studied Colbertism, and they took it and amplified it when they created the system of national banking, protective tariffs, directed credit for big projects, industry. That was the American Revolution created a new system of political economy. And that's why Alexander Hamilton was assassinated by the founder of Wall Street, Aaron Burr, who was always beholden to the City of London intelligence. And that's why Aaron Burr, to avoid being arrested in 1808 because he was caught in a conspiracy to break up the Republic and put himself up as king of the Northwestern kingdom that was supposed to be created in the territories that hadn't become provinces yet, states yet. He was caught red-handed. Somebody blew the whistle, and he had to escape and avoid arrest by going to the house in London of Jeremy Bentham, where he lived for 5 years. That's Aaron Burr. He lived with Jeremy Bentham, the head of British intelligence, for 5 years before being deployed back to the United States, where he then became the patron of Andrew Jackson and Martin Van Buren, who he set up, and he was the first earliest backer funded and controlled by British intelligence to put their populist puppet in power, who was a racist slave power puppet who cleansed the South of natives. And we've talked about this in your previous show.
But wasn't Andrew, though, didn't he run on the idea that he was going to get rid of the swampy bankers, the people that put him in?
It's all smoke screen.
That was all a smoke screen.
Yeah, all he did, he basically, the sophistry there was that his job was to destroy the second Hamiltonian Bank of the USA, run by Nicholas Biddle. That was his job. When he said we're going to destroy the corrupt bankers, it was actually the National Bank of the USA that he was designated to destroy. But what he did is he empowered all of the actual Wall Street banks, the private banks, and he basically gave every state bank the right to control their own credit. He destroyed a national currency. The idea of a national mission was all destroyed. He canceled all of the infrastructure projects that were being built up in the 1820s and 30s. He canceled all of it to pay the debt. So everything was just shut down. The nation was shut down, and it was deregulated and turned into a speculative frenzy, so that you had the bank panic of 1837. That was a giant bubble popping caused by his deregulation policies and free trade. And the nation was completely destroyed. And also the slave power, he gave them he cleansed all of the southern areas of the Cherokee natives and created the Trail of Tears that killed thousands of Cherokee, and gave all of the land that they had lived on over to the slave power to grow cotton for the British, who bought all the cotton. They were the primary purchaser of South cotton, which they then used in their textile industries because and created a global monopoly. Meanwhile, India was forced to produce opium that they then fed to the Chinese to keep China down.
It's
and that
just
was
like 180 degrees of what the people, I've believed about Andrew Jackson for years, right? I mean, then he was one of the good guys. He was like 1814, took a little trip down the mighty Mississippi, right? Mathew Ehret is with it. He's always fun, CanadianPatriot.org. So before we go, let's kind of dig in a bit to, so I'd like to understand, Mathew, more about the globalist agenda now with this whole socialist idea of canceling student loans, which is going to happen, universal basic income, the Green New Deal, minimum wage, which is going like so the what of this is to just make is it as simple as just to make people weaker by borrowing money from the private bankers to give to people, like what they're doing with this $2 trillion stimulus thing, right?
Yeah,
is this the idea behind it, to make people weaker?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's designed to create a new feudalism. They've romanticized those who are controlling the Great Reset agenda. These billionaire technocrats who see themselves as sort of like above these Ubermensch, right? These more than human Nietzschean freaks like Bill Gates and others. They see themselves, and these Rhodes scholars, right? They're trained to see themselves in a very elitist way. They romanticize states of no change. And they think that states of uncontrollability, which are states of change, are bad because you don't control creativity. You know, like, so whenever whenever you have sovereign nation states working for the general good of the people and encouraging the development of new infrastructure, new technology, the development of the arts and culture for the people, there's a lot of mental activity, creative mental activity that tends to arise. And whenever that happens, you have new discoveries coming out of, you have the creation of Einsteins and Max Plancks and Da Vinci's that tend to arise out of poor families that you're like, I didn't allow that to happen. And they're control freaks. So when they look at things like the feudal dark ages, where, the population of Europe collapsed by 50% or something, they romanticize that because in that world, they're like, okay, the slaves knew their place. There was, 95% illiteracy, and that was good. People didn't, when they're ignorant, they didn't have greater ambition to change things or to think through causality. The slaves knew their role. The masters were happy in their castles. Now they've romanticized that because life wasn't even very good for the kings and masters living in castles who didn't have soap. That had no refrigeration. So ironically, the oligarchy themselves rely themselves upon the benefits of technological discovery that's happening outside of their control. They hate the thing that causes creative discoveries, but they like the effects of it that they use for themselves. They're fine with that. So all that to say, it's an irony, a self-contradiction of empire. So what they want to do is create a sort of technocratic feudalism that crushes the idea of creative thought and change, and create sort of this permanent system of an end of history forever. The problem is Russia, China, and the nations working on the Belt and Road Initiative, which is otherwise known as the Multipolar Alliance or the New Silk Road,
they're not having
have created. Right? No, they're not having it. They're not accepting the depopulation. They're by standing up, and you could see this at Davos at the conference in January of this year. Putin and Xi Jinping's speeches. You should read the whole thing.
I did. I heard Putin's speech, man. He was like, he was saying things like, Mathew, you guys are crazy. What are you doing here?
Yeah, it's really strong, and they're making the case that sovereign nation states have to be preserved. That's the idea of multipolarity, that the whole of the world has to be defined around the respect for the individual liberty of each nation, and that the purpose of economic activity and the behavior of money and investments has to be somehow tied to the real world that benefits human life. That's why you have these infrastructure projects that are pulling people out of poverty at rates that we've never seen before, coming out of that part of the world, not coming out of what we're doing. So that's what the empire wants to crush, because they know, the oligarchy knows, that to the degree that China and Russia continue to display a common sense, rational, moral principle of banking and economic activity, the more it will create an alternative in the minds of people like us and people who are in policy-making positions across the transatlantic zone to jump onto that as our system melts down. They don't want to have an alternative for us to jump onto. So there's sort of
the whole thing behind the Russian election thing, and now the China virus, they call it, or whatever, and the whole China thing, and the election fraud and all this stuff, which may or may not be true. China was involved. Who knows? Is this what this is all about, to make these guys the bad guys so we don't think they're alternatives? China, Russia?
Yeah, like no country is perfect, and you got problems. Sure. You have deep state elements within China. I mean, look at the triads, right? Like the existence of the Chinese organized crime syndicates that are centered around Hong Kong, Macau, some areas of Guangdong province on the south east coast of China, and also Taiwan. But the triad structure, which is sort of like the mafia criminal syndicates, but they're very powerful, were created by British intelligence throughout the 19th century during the Opium Wars. That's when they created this organized system of crime, and it was very tied to British Freemasonic operations too under Lord Palmerston. At the same time as they were doing this, when they were creating different, organized crime networks in India, that would be self-controlling, so that you could have 20,000 British troops in India, which was a population of 400 million. But how does 20,000 troops control 400 million people? It's not by the physical force of the British troops. It's by creating an organized crime network using the Brahmins and the caste structures that are already there in India that the British were able to profile, amplify, and all of the progressive Indian movements like the Indian Congress that wanted to get rid of the caste system. That's what they had to crush and put water on those fires. While putting gas on the more regressive fires, and they were creating zones of local control, and they did that with the United States. That's how the creation of the deep state, and they're all still to this very day controlled by British foreign intelligence operations to this very day. China has been trying to expel that and purge that now for a few decades, and there's been a lot of effort that's been made by Xi Jinping to try to get rid of this corruption from within the heart of China, and he's done quite an incredible job at that. Putin as well is dealing with the mayor of Moscow, with varieties of Russian oligarchs that were created largely in the 1990s under the City of London directed shock therapy that raped Russia and privatized its state economy when the Soviet Union collapsed. So Putin basically had a meeting in 2000 with these various oligarchs saying, okay, look, there's going to be a new set of rules here after Yeltsin, right? And he said, okay, either you are now going to abide by national policy and what we do, you can keep your money. I'll let you keep your money. But if you don't abide by the rules that Russia, that I'm going to put forth, we're going to take you down. And you had a lot of Russian oligarchs that still resisted, right? And he put them in prison, or if they did escape, they went to London, where they now have mansions in what's called Moscow on the Thames. People like Sergei Skripal, or were part of this traitor class, and so Russia is still dealing with some of these traitorous elements of billionaires who are more loyal to the City of London within his own civil service, that are very powerful to this very day. Even though Russia is still on top of things, they're not. It's a problem. Yeah. So you have these different elements.
We have a couple emails here before we go for Mathew. One is from Sophia. She says, why is the Biden administration bombing Syria now? What is this about, in your opinion? The Syria stuff. What, is this involved with the Putin and the pipeline? Is that part of it?
No, not the Nord Stream pipeline directly, though they hate the Nord Stream pipeline. Absolutely. Sure. I mean, everything is sort of connected in that sense. But no, they're what you're going to see now with Biden coming in, like under Trump, there were no new wars, and Trump, despite the slanders against him, did a lot to resist the military-industrial complex in a variety of ways over 4 years. Under Obama, the policy of the U.S. foreign policy, which was tied to the CIA, which Trump also disconnected the CIA from the Pentagon and the military in November of last year. They're reintegrating that once again, and the Obama policy was to use proxies, so fund through Saudi Arabia, through Turkey, and through on-the-ground CIA operations, including Integrity Initiative. Actually, if you look at these new data documents that were dumped, a lot of them go through how they're actually funding various rebel groups again in Syria, which are tied to ISIS and Al Qaeda in a variety of ways. So they use these things to create mass destabilizations, and they just blame things on Iran. So the current attack on Syria, as well as there was a more recent attack by Israel on groups in Syria who were defending Bashar al-Assad and the Syrian sovereignty against ISIS. What are they saying? They're saying these are groups that were attacking in Syria that are run by Iran, who apparently these groups run by Iran attacked U.S. Military contractors in Iraq a couple of weeks ago. And because these groups attacked a military installation in Iraq, we're now going to kill these Iranian proxies in Syria and bomb Syria. I mean, the whole thing is really just moving us. They want to bring back online the overthrow of Bashar al-Assad. They never gave up on that. And Trump worked very hard to realign American military interests with the Russians, who went into Syria in 2015 to stop a Libya debacle from happening, which did happen. And with 1/10 of the military budget, Vladimir Putin was able to wipe out most of ISIS's foundation of support and preserve the stability of Syria. They want to undo all of this and just bring back give Assad the Libya operation. So this is going to escalate. There's going to be a massive escalation of ISIS, and we're being told by the media already, it's predictive programming, that ISIS is reorganizing themselves. They have a new leader. So we're being prepared to accept this new ISIS. Which is always about, again, destroying even more Iraq and ultimately Iran, which is a key area in the Belt and Road Initiative, stretching through the southern connection from China through Xinjiang, which is why Xinjiang is also being attacked so China's being attacked very much for all of the bad things it's doing to its Uyghur Muslim population in Xinjiang. I mean, and it has nothing to do with the Western concern for the well-being of Uyghurs. In fact, the life of Uyghurs, if you actually look beyond the slander and anecdotal evidence that has no bearing in reality, there is no genocide happening by the Chinese government against Muslims in Xinjiang. What you have is a doubling of the Uyghur population in the last 25 years, 100-fold increase of GDP, and massive trade skills, investments into education. Like, it's crazy, an infrastructure like we've never seen, of greening deserts of Xinjiang southern province, as well as building many rail projects and schools all across China's west coast and into Iran, into Pakistan, into Afghanistan, creating situations of economic opportunity that then would stretch into Iraq, into Syria, into Lebanon, into Egypt, into Africa, as well as other branches into Europe, which would create a climate of hope and opportunity. And that's what the empire is afraid of. Wow. And that's why they want to just create this mass instability in that entire zone and inflame Wahhabism, the most radical interpretation of the Quran possible, which is Saudi-funded, British-funded, and it's basically kill anybody who doesn't have our specific interpretation of the Quran, including other Muslims who might not think the way we do. That this is entirely a British operation.
Fascinating.
So yeah, that's what Biden is inflaming
this is
again.
From George. I'm really enjoying the show. Thanks for having Mathew on. Have him back on more often. We will. I'd like to know how the Vatican fits into all of this, because I've read a lot about the Vatican, he says, and they sound like pretty swampy to me. George says they're swampy. The Vatican swampy?
Yeah, I mean, the Vatican is a place, just like any institution of power and influence in modern times or the last 500 years. It's a place, or even longer, it's a place where there's been a lot of evil and a place where there's been good, a lot of good. And it all depends on the times. It's just like the institution of the USA. There's times when it's been more infiltrated and less infiltrated. There's been times where humanists and patriots in command of their conscience were in a driving seat position, and other times where they were taken out. And there's popes who have been killed, poisoned by Jesuits over the years, many years. I mean, there's many cases. There's cases of popes in the 1890s who who basically went on a war against different Scottish Rite Freemasonic operations and infiltration. They spoke eloquently against this. There's a pope that excommunicated all the Jesuits as well in the 18th century, who also died mysteriously of probably food poisoning, oyster poisoning, like Warren Harding. So you have a battle historically. When you look at the Vatican, you have to look at it as a battle between good and evil within. I think in more recent years, I've tended to like John Paul II. I think overall there was a reason why they tried to assassinate him in the 1980s. He generally was somebody who I identified as being a lover of humanity. He did a lot of a good guy. Benedict, I think, was a mixed bag who compromised way too much with the pedophile problem of the church and looked another way. But in the 1990s, when he was still cardinal, I got a book with a bunch of speeches, and he came out attacking the New World Order quite a bit, and I was surprised to read all of that. Yeah. But then, I mean, Pope Francis, this is the first time I think ever in history that you've had a living pope step down in favor of another pope being brought in. And the fact that Pope Francis, the Jesuit, is a very high-level Jesuit, indicates to me, with his policies promoting the Paris Climate Accords, the greening of Christianity, like creating a new ethic that removes the idea that there's anything divine or special about humankind that is there in the Bible. He's basically trying to say, no, it's actually not really that, and trying to rewire the wording so that we get rid of the idea that there's anything special about us. And it's really just about reducing our impact on nature. That's the point of being a good Christian. I think that there's a satanic impulse and intention embedded within that takeover of the church currently, but there are good there are still good cardinals. There's good people within the Vatican fighting against this. So I always encourage people to take that nuanced approach to appreciate the internal dynamics and power battles within anything that they're commenting on, because there's so much out there, like the Ring trilogy that I've seen and other things, which try to paint these very narrow, all black, all white judgments onto these institutions, which blind you from any insights you could get on a real historical study.
Is the Vatican is loaded monetarily with lots of money, as people say? I mean, have they really got a bunch of money stacked away? Any ideas?
But it's less about the money itself and more about the rules defining money's behavior, and that's the City of London, which really has the top-down influence.
Money behavior. What do you mean by that? Rules behind money's behavior.
Defining the behavior of the monetary system. So it's less of the accumulation of capital and more about how capital behaves that's more important. So the Vatican doesn't determine globally the behavior of the capital. They have a vast accumulation of capital, whereas you have to look at things like the City of London, where you look at who are those controlling the operating system, defining the rules, the definitions of the behavior of the entire system of how money will circulate, move, behave, be defined, how our minds relate to this thing called money. That's more important. So in that sense, the City of London is much more in the driver's seat.
I see. Finally, so what is your take on this whole vaccine thing? It's not even a vaccine. Technically, legally, we've been shown very clearly that these are injectable medical devices. They're not vaccines. They're not classified as vaccines these things, according to the people that we've talked to in the research, they're very, very dangerous. But it seems like there are huge forces behind, through all the media, of course, to get vaccinated. Of course, in the Gates thing. What is this all about, in your opinion, with this vaccine thing for COVID? Now there's going to be one and two, and you got to get three.
No. Exactly.
Is it all eugenics, lowering the population, Mathew, in your opinion? Let's just kill more people? Is it that simple?
I don't know enough to speak too deeply, but what I can say is that, I was just reading about how the Russian Sputnik 5 vaccine actually uses conventional, historic, use a little particle of dead virus, which is the typical way. Yeah. I didn't know it's very different from the RNA manipulation thing.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're actually using the conventional idea. And in that sense, I'm persuaded that going back to the 18th century, the days of smallpox, the human body is a regenerative creation. And if you put a small particle of something, which is the whole idea of vaccinations originally, we could develop antibodies and become immune. Okay, fine. But under the last 35 plus year big pharma takeover, especially the scientific takeover of big science and especially medical science, and also looking at the carryover of a lot of these major eugenics organizations of the 1930s and 40s, like the Sterilization Society for Human Betterment.
Yes.
Which became Engender Health, a multi-billion-dollar megalith that's tied to Gavi, and it's tied to Oxford's AstraZeneca vaccine developments of mRNA vaccines, or also the Galton Institute, which is also enmeshed in this Gates operation with the World Health Organization and is developing the AstraZeneca. The Galton Institute was the British Eugenics Society that Julian Huxley ran, while he created the World Wildlife Fund. That was funding Hitler's eugenics policies. So I'm not comfortable when I look at those connections, and then I look at how Eric Lander, the current science czar of the United States under Biden, formerly it was John Holdren who ran Obama's science policy, and now it's Lander bringing back the Holdren policy. Lander is a Rhodes Scholar, and he was the guy he's just a mathematician. He looks at the world from a mathematical lens, that it's all just balancing equations, and he looks at life that way too. When he was the head of the Human Genome Project, he was the head of that, and the Human Genome Project maybe unlocked a few interesting things about human DNA. But if you look at the misuse of this, through things like CRISPR, I think CRISPR is a technology that involves gene manipulation and stuff, which it could be. I'm open to the possibility of this being used for the good to get rid of hereditary diseases like sickle cell anemia or what. I mean, there's so many big diseases. I'm a technological optimist, so I'm not going to just sit there and say these are things we just always have to live with and there's no cure. I believe that anything, including GMOs, could be feasibly used for the good of humankind, but you can't. If you have an evil, satanic, oligarchical system defining the political structure and economic structure in which these things are operating, I'm not comfortable with that at all.
Yeah.
And the fact that all of these guys are really, really obsessed with depopulation and things like that, I don't trust it.
Yeah, they really. Hollywood is going bonkers over Governor Abbott opening up Texas. I don't know if you've seen some of the people out there. These guys.
No, I didn't see it. No.
Oh, I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, and that ties into the media. I mean, we know that there's a very few people pulling all the strings in virtually all the media, from the New York Times down to local TV stations. Do you see that ever changing at all, Mathew Ehret? Ever? Getting, I mean, I've been in broadcasting for over 50 years. I've never seen anything so bonkers as this. Never.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. I don't know. I mean, I like the science thing, like entertainment and science. It's all about do you live in a political economic system defined by the oligarchical principle of the few managing the many for the benefit of a master class, or do you live in a society that acts upon the reality of the sacredness of human life, as I see is an increasingly dominant quality of what defines the behavior of the multipolar alliance around the Russia-China cooperation agenda. If you live in that type of system, and we've seen examples where, I mean, look at times when America was more moral, not never perfect, but more moral, more accessing of its humanity and basic fundamental human virtues. You were able to produce, like, look at Frank Capra's movies, of
Sure.
Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and a lot of these great edifying movies like The State of the Union with Spencer Tracy in 1949, or Judgment at Nuremberg, or there's many movies that had the effect of edifying, enriching, and creating better citizens with insight into reality than a lot of the movies that are designed to have the opposite effect in our more modern age. And there's China is not very good. They're learning. They're not good at subtlety and drama. Like they're overcoming a lot of their I think their decades of communist art experience, which is very literalistic and propaganda-esque. So they're learning. They're shaking it off. But some of the movies that I've seen coming out of China, like Wandering Earth, is an interesting one where it's like, it's a great example of a major production, multi-million-dollar production, very entertaining to watch. The acting, like I said, is very, man, they got a ways to go. But the principle of, like, the Earth is encountering. Have you heard of this, the Wandering Earth movie?
No, I've got to watch that. The Wandering Earth?
Yeah, Google it, Wandering Earth. You might have to pay a few bucks for it online, but it's
right.
you basically
I'll check it out.
The sun is going supernova, and the Earth, the people of the Earth have to get their shit together and learn how to work together to figure out how do you get the Earth into another orbit in
cool.
Alpha Centauri. That's going to be a 3,000-year project of developing techniques and technologies to get us out of our orbit before the sun goes supernova. And we're 20 years into this transit where now the Earth is moving around Venus, where it has to do a little bit of a boomerang around Venus to get the momentum to get out of our solar system. But Venus is doing some weird things where its gravitational field is all of a sudden way stronger than they calculated, and it's sucking the Earth into Venus.
Watch that.
And they all have to figure out how do you get out of that. And the whole thing has a real spiritually edifying quality of making you love humankind a lot more.
Yeah.
So I think that sort of thing can be done in an entertaining, high value way.
Sure.
But yeah, to the degree that you have depopulation, fixated
everywhere
freaks
now.
running.
I mean, they sneak it in too, as you know. I watched a movie maybe 3-4 weeks ago, and it was pretty good. It was about, I think it was Clooney, who's a total socialist. I mean, he's just crazy. But, the movie was pretty good. But at the very end, the whole reason why they were flying around in space looking for another place was we didn't pay attention to global warming. They just threw that in at the end, right? This is the reason why the whole movie was taking place. They waited till the end. Oh, we killed each other because, and they do it, boy, all the time. And they sneak this stuff in there. But even, even things like, Aaron Sorkin, who's one of my favorite writers. I mean, he's really good, but he's total socialist. I mean, you watch even things like The West Wing, and boy, I tell you what, they got it in there all the time, whatever their little political agenda thing in there, whether it be pro-abortion or whatever, they got it in there. And, well, I don't know. You must have to take
suits as well. They do this a lot.
You must have to take the blue pill just to become a movie star these days, right?
Or else you get canceled, right? And I mean, I like Matthew McConaughey. There's a variety of.
He's pretty good.
Yeah, he's pretty. He's a moral guy. He's him on Jordan Peterson, and he's a human being with substance who's more of a conservative minded guy. He accesses his morality and he picks his parts based upon a certain moral principle. He doesn't just take whatever. Matt Damon tends to do the same thing too. So you got these good people. Mel Gibson as well, but Mel Gibson kind of
John Voight is
unhinged but cool.
Right? James Woods. What's the guy's James Woods?
Exactly.
Of course, they write in. I see every now and then I see a little thing from them on Twitter or something that somebody will post, and they have a hard time getting work though. Boy, you're.
No, they do. Yeah.
Oh man, they don't like you over out there in wacky land. And you know what, Matthew, which is interesting, being a screenwriter as I am. I mean, if you look at Netflix and Amazon and Hulu, man, they're all over it too. Man, these globalist socialists are right in there, boy. Real deep already. Very, very deep. You look at any of the documentaries on Amazon or Netflix, they all got a socialist, liberal, globalist agenda to them. Every one of them. Yeah. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that Netflix is a complete social engineering operation. It's a really effective way to control the zeitgeist. There is one thing though. I would say anybody who wants to watch something entertaining, but you don't want to binge watch something that's going to make you a worse person, because it's hard to find things like that. You don't want to waste your time on that. But I really would recommend. There's this very nonlinear. You wouldn't expect me to say this, but I watched hundreds of hours of this show, which is actually on Netflix. Called Ertugrul, and it's a Turkish
what's the name of
drama. Ertugrul.
Ertugrul.
It's got 5 seasons. Each season is massive. Erturgul.
And it's in subtitles. Ertugrul.
Yeah, it's in subtitles, and the story it has all of the makings of a proper classical tragedy drama, but with characters that have more substance than I've ever seen in a film, with a general plot line that actually gives you insight. It all takes place around the end of the 13th century, featuring the quasi-mythological father of the founder of the Ottoman Empire. There's a lot of creative writing of history, and I don't know if the actual founder of the Ottoman Empire, Osman, was actually all that good, but all that to say, what the writers do in this gives you more insight into how political operations actually work, how conspiracies work, how do you navigate through conspiracies with wisdom, and transformation. How do bad people get transformed to become good people? How do good people get corrupted into? And I mean, it has more of. It takes more of the spectrum of human nature into consideration, as well as political dynamics into consideration, than I've ever seen anything do. So I would recommend people, even though it starts a bit slow, push on, watch the first season. It doesn't get stale, and there's a lot of it. There's hundreds of episodes,
Ertugrul,
but it's worth it. Ertugrul.
Ertugrul.
I gotta write it down. ERTU ERTUGRUL. There you go.
And probably Netflix. Got through Netflix because they didn't look at the subtitles, right? They didn't figure out what was going on.
Yeah, I guess not. It's weird, but that's the one thing that I found on Netflix that wasn't shit.
Well, Matthew, it's a pleasure. Yeah, we had a good time today. Thanks for coming on. It's always fun to have you here. Tell folks about. One thing, I keep saying finally. Before you go, give folks just a few ideas in short thing, because I got to move on and I have an appointment, about some things that they can start to think about and do to protect themselves and to have a better life with everything that you've talked about the last 2 hours. There's a lot of, what are some ideas that you have? I mean, that if you had a child, do you have a child?
I don't.
Okay,
But
say if you had a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old, what would you be telling them to do now? Really?
Well, I would sincerely be looking into homeschooling and how to do that. That would be a high priority for me.
Yeah.
But I think that I created an organization with my wife Cynthia called the Rising Tide Foundation to focus on education. Yeah, it's called risingtidefoundation.net.
Okay.
So anybody can go to risingtidefoundation.net, and what we're trying to do is to create a foundation for a proper classical humanist education with a focus upon understanding the best of different cultures of the world and history, with a focus also on science. We do lectures every week. We have reading groups set up, study groups. And what we're trying to do is look at, well, what were the types of educational processes in place throughout history that the empire worked to corrupt, destroy, because it awakens, there's certain methods of thinking about thinking, what's called epistemology, the science of knowledge, right? How do you come to knowledge? What are the pathways of the mind? And when people become aware, self-aware of what actions their mind does when it organizes itself to look for paradoxes, instead of just trying to memorize things and fit data into the mind. Look instead for the questions that lead to paradoxes, that lead to better questions, that lead to generating solution concepts to paradoxes that allow you a resolution. This is what Plato does. So I suggest people really study the works, the dialogues of Plato. That I couldn't emphasize that more. Read them, reread them, discuss them in a group, socialize that process, because he's teaching you the art of asking fruitful questions and becoming self-aware of thoughts you thought you knew, but upon poking around, you discover that they're wind eggs. They're actually not potent ideas. They don't measure up to reality. And then you could start thinking about where else do these qualities of thinking arise in other writers, as you incorporate and internalize that into your own mode of teaching. And I think people have to think of themselves as students and teachers for their children, to be role models for their fellow citizens, and it's contagious, because when you start demonstrating that you asked me earlier on, like, how do I keep all this information in my head? I didn't really think about it too much, but I guess it was through really saturating myself, turning off the TV, everything else, social media, just don't go on that for a long time, and just immerse yourself in Plato, in the writings of certain key figures that we have on our Rising Tide website. If you go down to the Library of Alexandria section at the bottom of our website, there's original writings of hundreds of key, beautiful thinkers in history that you can just read and internalize their process of thinking. You discover that there's something constant amongst all of their minds.
That's great.
So I that's what I would encourage people to do right now, because we've been robbed of a proper education by people like, Julian Huxley, who ran UNESCO and reorganized the worldwide education that many people growing up in the 1950s, 60s, 70s were all victims to these reforms that took out the study of the classics. That's, we used to learn about Greek language, Latin, so we could enrich our minds with new languages and be able to read original writings of the Bible or Homer or Plato in their original works. These were all called dead white European males and obsolete. So we were told not to do that. They're not practical, and instead to focus on, memorizing mathematical formulas instead of understanding constructive geometry and astronomy, which used to be the focus. No longer were we told to actually think through, why did Pythagoras discover his formula of the Pythagorean theorem using physical geometry? He didn't have a formula to play with. He had to use circles, and he had to use, divisions of circles to figure out, well, why would a squared plus b squared equal c squared physically in the universe? And then after discovering the eureka, he could then label symbols on it and call it a formula that we could use. But to just memorize the formula like we were all told to do without being told why it's true, this only creates little robots to fit into cogs of a machine. So this is something we all have to sort of undo our conditioning and then access a more natural way of thinking by replicating real discoveries. So, and also the writings of LaRouche. I would say for people who really wanted to dig into this, there's a recently deceased American economist. He died at the age of 96 last year, named Lyndon LaRouche. And some of his
we know
his
of Lyndon. Boy, he's cool. Yeah, cool guy, man.
He's very cool. Very cool guy. And we're actually, our study group is just beginning to read some of his writings, The Science of a Christian Economy, that he wrote while he was in prison as a political prisoner in Virginia in the early 90s. And that's a whole interesting story, because Robert Mueller, the guy who was assigned to destroy Trump was the guy who was also designed at that time in the 80s to destroy LaRouche's organization when it was becoming a little bit too influential for the likings of Kissinger. Yeah. And LaRouche's writings are, especially his older writings from the 80s and the 90s, which is what we're going to be reading as our Rising Tide group, they're so rich with epistemological density. I really highly recommend people Google LaRouche or go to the Rising Tide website and look on the alphabetical ordering of the Library of Alexandria, which is at the very bottom of our website. Every thinker is in alphabetical order. Go to the L section, and we have not all, but many of the key writings, books, and stuff available for free online. Read that and use it. Yeah. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, risingtidefoundation.net, right?
Yeah.
I kind of I'm kind of addicted to courtroom dramas and the whole Socratic method, of asking questions and all of that. That's pretty cool. And, screenwriting, there's a lot of deep work that goes back to Aristotle and the way he constructed a story and drama, Aristotle with pretty cool stuff too.
Aristotle actually, one of the things that I recently, I came to discover this when I was originally waking up to the New World Order and trying to figure out how does this empire organize itself. And a few years into this process, I had read a writing by LaRouche that I'll email it to you and you could share it maybe with your audience, called The Secrets Known Only to the Inner Elites, which has a picture on the cover. It's from 1977 of Plato versus Aristotle from the School of Athens by Raphael. Mm-hmm. And in it, he basically goes through how Aristotle was a geopolitical creation by the empire to undermine and destroy Plato's academy from within. He actually was not Plato's student, but created a mode of thinking that was a direct attack on what Plato was doing in his dialogues, and was tied to high cultish networks from the Oracle of Delphi and the Peripatetic school. But yeah, it's a whole interesting dialogue, and maybe we could have a whole discussion around that in a future interview.
Probably could.
But I'll send you this paper.
Yeah,
it's really interesting. Yeah.
All right, kiddo. Thanks a lot. So, is your wife a geeky historian as you are? I mean, is she
super geeky? Super geeky. I love her.
You got
Cynthia Chung. Well, she actually writes. She writes for the Strategic Culture Foundation, which I also write for. Her work is just incredible on history and geopolitics. And they could see a lot of her works both on the Canadian Patriot website and also on the Rising Tide website with her lectures and her classes that are on there too.
Wow. Well, I'm sure you guys have fun over there. And thanks for being on the show. 2 hours. Great, Matthew. We appreciate it. You coming on the show. It's an honor, sir. And we'll keep in touch. Let us know if we can help.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on as always.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Matthew Ehret, CanadianPatriot.org and RisingTideFoundation.net. We'll put all these links on our show page. It's fun. I've been talking to a fellow like that who really, it's just more fun than going on Facebook, I tell you what, and arguing about left and right. All right, kids. Well, I will see you. When am I going to see you? Tomorrow. Jean Berlando. This is a very unique fellow. We are all unique, but he's really pretty cool. He's going to be here tomorrow at 10 o'clock. He's up in the northwest part of California. He's into regenerative farming, but also Chinese medicine and all kinds of things. It's a good man. He's going to be here tomorrow, Thursday. Hope you enjoyed the show today as much as I did. Thanks for your ongoing support. And we will see you tomorrow at 10 o'clock. And then on Friday, we'll have 2 or 3 hours of just Patrick and you. And we talk about all things kind of soul, mind, body, spiritual stuff. And I think we'll have plenty to talk about on Friday. So I love you all very much. Thanks for your ongoing support. Really appreciate it. It means a lot to us, all the great emails we get and you supporting us by looking at our products and stuff. So take care. I love you. May the blessings be.
We are listener supported. One Radio Network.